What's up everyone, Jonas here for Thomann synthesizers. In today's video I would like to dive into the topic of sample and hold because this is a function I am using a lot in my own productions and I thought would be interesting to share it with you. Without further ado, let's jump right in. So what is sample and hold? Basically it's more of a function than a signal, because with a sample and hold you can send a voltage frequency to the module and tell it by a trigger to hold the signal until you trigger it again. All in all, this makes sample and hold for me a really interesting source of modulation to receive a lot of variation and happy exceedances. The Doepfer dual sample and hold is on its layout a really stripped down and basic sample and hold, because here you have the trigger input, the sample input and the sample and hold output. A lot of times a sample and hold is referred to as a random stepped voltage generator, but actually it not necessarily has to be, because it's depending on the input that you're going to sample for the frequency. We could use a noise. And perhaps using the noise in combination with sample and hold, it's one of the most used combination in Eurorack. So when you sample the noise, there are so many frequencies, every time it's getting triggered, it's so random that you have actually a stepped random voltage generator. Where could we use sample and hold? Personally, I like to use it on my drums. So I'm using Pamela's new workout to send the same clock that I've sent to the Doepfer sample and hold to trigger the drum sound. So in this case it's a steady plain tom, I would say, but we can use the sample and hold signal now to create more dynamic rhythms by choking some notes. And because we don't have an LFO, we have the random voltage signal depending on the noise, so it's completely random when it's going to choke it. And of course we can create accents. Or we can change the timbre of the sound itself. So of course the drum sound we created will change over time, and of course we can change the release of the sound itself. Speaking about drums and creating more interesting and dynamic drum patterns, we can of course apply sample and hold or random voltage signal, of course also outside of the Eurorack box. In this case I'm using the Octatrack with an hi-hat sample I've created inside Ableton. And now if we go into the LFO section, we have different LFOs to assign, and we can also choose the waveform we want to use for our modulation. So in this case I'm of course going for random, and then we just have to increase the speed. And I'm assigning it to the pitch of the sample. So on each random step it's playing a different pitch of our sample. So let's assign it to our start as well with the second LFO. So it's always playing it with a different start. But of course we can assign the random signal to an effect as well. But besides creating more dynamic drum patterns and drum sounds, we can of course use it for sound design overall as well. For this one I'm going to use the Access virus, because here we have the possibility of a sample and hold or random voltage on the modulation source. So I want to create something like a rhythmic post-dubstep kind of bassline sound. The first oscillator is set to a hypersaw, and the second one is the wavetable synthesizer, and the third oscillator is actually turned off, but we have the sub oscillator as well. So for the filter we have the first filter on the low pass and the second on the bandpass. And the arpeggiator is playing 3 different octaves, up and down, in a not particular pattern. Let's set the first LFO into the sample and hold. And the clock we have 1/8. So, and now I want to send this to the cutoff of the second filter, so where the bandpass is. Using sample and hold or stepped random is of course possible in a DAW as well. In here I'm using wavetable and I already put in some MIDI notes. So usually I like to modulate of course with a sine wave LFO as well, and I like to connect it to various destinations such as the oscillator position, filter cutoff, as well as a little bit of unison, so that we have a little bit of movements on the side as well, and on the amp envelope as well. So let's have a listen to it with the LFO set to a sine wave. Then we see, of course, it's really interesting, but it's also kind of repeating itself all the time, and it's wobbly and has a nice drive, let's say. But I think it's pretty interesting when you use the stepped random, because then it appeals to me of being kind of a different chord all the time, although we are not changing the chords itself, because we have a clocked opening and closing of the position, so we're adding and taking away harmonics all the time in a random order. Moreover, stepped random can be fun in Eurorack as well, of course. So in this case I'm using the Richter Wogglebug by Make Noise to send a kind of stepped random voltage signal to our oscillator. In this case is the 4MS Ensemble Oscillator with 16 polyphonic voices. I'm using the smooth signal to send it to our filter. And this right now is just one plain oscillator, and we can increase it with the spread and add harmonics and voices to it. So let's now check out how it sounds like when we use the random voltage signal on the spread. So we can hear it's a stepped flow of opening the spread on the module. Let's now close the cutoff and use the modulation with the sample and hold or random voltage signal as well on the filter. In this case, it's the smooth one, so we have like a kind of rhythmic signal to it. As well, I've added some reverb to it. To have a steady clock, I've used Pamela's new workout to clock the Richter Wogglebug. If you don't have a clock source, then I could recommend the Behringer sample and hold taken from the ARP 2500 series, because this module is a dual sample and hold random voltage generator. The module can be clocked internally with the clock frequency here, so we can increase it and decrease it. Right, that's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it and that it was interesting diving a little bit into the topic of sample and hold. So if you have any questions, please put it in the comment section and I will check them out. So thanks again and see you next time.